United States Senator Tom Cotton. We begin with the big news, Senator Cotton, that Ohio State is ranked number 2 and Alabama, the SEC Patsy schedule person, number 1. I do not see Arkansas in the top 10 rating, Senator.
No, had a tough run here, but Ohio State benefited from a lot of other teams losing. I guess if you can't win all your own games, that's one way to do it.
I am telling you right now that I like lists, and there's a list in front of me of potential secretaries of defense that include your name on it, which I don't think is possible because you would always sit on the Army side of the Army-Navy game. What do you make of these reports?
One of these days it'd be nice to see the Army win that game so you can sit on the winning side. Maybe this year, doing a lot better this year. Hugh, Donald Trump was just elected 8 days ago. He's going to make all these decisions about his White House staff and his cabinet in due time, and I think we should all give him the time to make those decisions.
That's what I've been saying this morning. When President Obama was President Obama-elect, he didn't name a press secretary until November 22nd. He didn't name Secretary of the Treasury Geithner until after Thanksgiving. And then all of his other appointments were made in December. What is the hysteria in the media about?
I think a lot of people in the media still haven't come to grips with the president-elect's victory last week. They're maybe going through the second or third stage of grief. Hopefully after the long Thanksgiving break next week, they can come back refreshed and with some clearer eyes about the new reality in Washington.
All right, let's talk about a couple of important stories. First of all, you're on Senate Intel. I don't know if you've been briefed on the allegation that 700 million Android phones were sending users' data back to China. That would be a serious problem. What's your assessment of this story, Senator Cotton?
Hugh, I probably shouldn't comment on the briefings I've received on this particular matter, but as I've said for a long time now, threats to our personal data, whether it's emails, text messages, phone calls, financial information, health records, are genuine, and they're growing, not just from nation states, but also from terrorist organizations and criminal gangs. That's one reason why it's so important that our leaders in places like Silicon Valley work with government agencies to try to develop encryption that is both secure and protects innocent Americans, but also allows our law enforcement and intelligence professionals the kind of data that they need pursuant to valid court orders and overseen by congressional committees as well.
Without betraying it, this is a chilling story, though. If 700 million iPhones or Androids are actually sending back individual data, the capacity to both disrupt market by virtue of what you learn from that, and to blackmail individuals or to surveil individuals and to know where critical people are at critical moments that you want to launch disruptive attacks, it's actually staggering that they have this much data on us.
It is. It's staggering, alarming that the American people could be subject to such a thing if those reports are accurate. I will say this is a general matter. For the last 3.5 years, there's been a lot of misperception and misinformation about what the United States government does since Edward Snowden stole so much data and from the NSA and released it publicly in violation of our laws. I know a lot of people that work in these agencies in the intelligence community. I can assure you that they obey the law, they uphold the finest traditions of our country, and everything they do is designed to protect American citizens. By contrast, countries like Russia are doing things designed to harm American citizens. And I hope all your listeners and all Americans will take that into account when they see partial and oftentimes misleading reports in the media about what our intelligence and law enforcement professionals may or may not be doing.
Now, let's turn to the rebuild of defense. Coming up after the break, Captain Jerry Hendricks, retired USN, a great fleet expert, is going to come and talk about how you get to 350 ships in a 12-carrier battle group Navy and how you do so fairly quickly. Wrote a great piece in the National Interest about it yesterday. He's from the Center for the New American Security. Great guy. But you, of course, are on armed services, and you have to authorize all this, and someone has to appropriate for it. How quickly can we get the rebuild going, Senator Cotton?
Well, I think we need a running start, Hugh. I'm proposing $26 billion in emergency supplemental spending in the new year. That $26 billion will cover the remainder of this fiscal year up through September 30th, all of the needs that our troops overseas in places like Iraq and Afghanistan have, the training and equipping of those troops who may be getting ready to go overseas, what the Army refers to as a group called Readiness, and it will also fund all of the so-called unfunded requests that our services submitted to the administration and Office of Managed Budget refused to fund. So that's a few more planes, a few more helicopters, a few more ships. That will be a bandage for the next 10 months. That'll get us through the end of this fiscal year, and it will allow us the time to review the kind of long-term, far-reaching reforms that we need to really substantially reinvest in our military to get our troop levels in the Army back up to 540,000 from 480,000, to get our ships back up from 280 to 350,000, to get to 1,200 fighters from 1,100 fighters. These are all proposals that Donald Trump made, and they're very consistent with what many bipartisan experts have said our military needs.
Now, we can expect the return of the yellow journalism, which finds the $800 Pentagon hammer. We can expect that. But do you have confidence in our acquisition system's ability to rapidly mobilize to this? And indeed, there is a lot of criticism that the Pentagon is bloated with civilians and not staffed enough with the military. What do you think of both of those things?
Well, anyone who's served in the military, as I have, knows that it's an amazing institution that accomplishes amazing things, but it is also the biggest bureaucracy of them all. And if you listen to some of our more distinguished secretaries of defense in my lifetime, like Bob Gates, he writes about some of the challenges of managing the Pentagon, and that while they've undertaken some important reforms, there are more that could be undertaken. In fact, our defense bill that I expect to pass sometime in the next month tries to pursue some of those reforms, trying to reduce some of that overhead that's spent at the Pentagon and get more of those personnel slots out to the front lines, whether those front lines are in Iraq and Afghanistan or whether they're in our bases training the next generation of troops. I think those are very important because ultimately our military is there not primarily to fight and win our country's wars, but to stop those wars from ever happening in the first place. And you don't stop wars from happening with staff officers. You stop them with trigger pullers.
Now, your supplemental appropriation, your emergency appropriation, President-elect Trump talked about the need to refurbish the nuclear deterrent immediately because it's not been attended to. The Ohio-class submarine's got a replacement SSBX, but it's not in the water or anywhere near it. Does anything go to the big three in your supplemental?
So those are going to be longer-term items, Hugh. Obviously, the Ohio-class replacement submarine is a 15 to 30-year project. The new B-21 bomber is on the same timeline. There is some immediate spending for our actual warheads and missiles and the command and control systems and so forth. Those are just all a little bit longer-term items. But as you say, they're ultimately the fundamental way that we deter conflict around the world. Some of my colleagues, sometimes ask why we spend so much money on weapons we never use, and I tell them they're wrong on both counts. We don't spend that much money. It's less than 5% of our total defense spending, and we use our nuclear weapons every single day.
I was disappointed yesterday when your colleague, Senator Paul, indicated he might even filibuster Rudy Giuliani or John Bolton if they were nominated for state. I have no connection with the Trump transition team, and I don't know him. But I know Ambassador Bolton very, very well, and he's extraordinarily competent if he were to go to state. Doesn't the new president deserve his team? Absent some ethical problem that is overriding, doesn't he deserve?
Well, Hugh, again, Donald Trump was just elected 8 days ago, and he's going to make these decisions in due time. I think it's important that we give him the time he needs, and then we evaluate all of those nominations if it's a position that requires confirmation on the merits of that nomination. I know John Bolton. I know Rudy Giuliani. They've both had a distinguished career in public service. If Donald Trump chooses them to serve, then at the time that nomination, we can evaluate them on their own merits. I wouldn't prejudge anyone. I would give the president-elect the time, the space he needs to prepare for the orderly transition of power.
Now, could you please remind the audience as well about the Reid rule on nominations? Because I had an argument with Chris Masters on the air, and I said, look, if you use this device, it applies to all nominations, and it may even apply to the legislative filibuster. It hasn't been ever used for the Supreme Court or otherwise. But what does Senator Reid do that named the Reid rule that ought to be in play for as long a period of time as the Republicans want to even the score before any reform of it occurs?
Yeah, this is just another example of how Harry Reid has disregarded some of the longest-standing traditions of the Senate. So until 3 years ago, Hugh, it took a 60-vote threshold to move on any nomination to the executive branch or any court. And about 3 years ago, the Democrats broke the rules to change the rules. They broke the rules to reduce that threshold from 60 votes to a simple majority for all executive branch nominations and for the lower courts. And they did so not under the way the rules of the Senate typically change with a two-thirds vote, but with a simple majority vote itself. So the text of the Senate rules clearly state that it still requires a 60-vote threshold, but Harry Reid, in violation of those rules, reduced it to a simple majority threshold. Therefore, any nomination that Donald Trump submits to the executive branch or the trial courts or the courts of appeals can be confirmed with a simple majority vote. And if the Democrats filibuster and dig in their heels on a Supreme Court nomination, then we Republicans could change the rules using the Reid rule at a simple majority threshold, not a two-thirds threshold. That's one reason why I hope the Democrats will be more cooperative with a new leader in Senator Schumer and will work with us and work with the president-elect to try to fill some of these positions promptly and also move forward on the agenda that earned so many votes last week.
Now, I want you to draw on your vast Harvard Law School education and tell me if there's any way to limit the precedent set by Senator Reid if indeed Republicans wish to use it. Because what I've told people is there's never been a Supreme Court nominee who's been filibustered and a majority vote would be needed. But the precedent is there and it applies. Am I right?
So the precedent is there, Hugh, and it can be used. But as you say, the real precedent was the filibuster of judges that started under George W. Bush. I take you back to the early 1990s, which is not that far long ago. Clarence Thomas was confirmed by a vote of 52 to 48. Obviously, Clarence Thomas's nomination was controversial, but the Democrats never thought of filibustering him. They let him have a simple up or down vote, and he was confirmed. So the real break in custom goes back to what the Democrats did under the Bush administration in consistently filibustering the nomination of judges like Miguel Estrada to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. I hope we can return to a time without any further use of the Reid rule in which we can move forward under that custom.
Senator Tom Cotton, always great to talk to you. Have a wonderful, wonderful return to D.C. and work. I look forward to seeing you soon back on the Potomac. In America, I look forward to seeing you as you head over to the relieffactor.com website. By the way, the news was just there. The precedent is there, and it can be used. Senator Tom Cotton on the Reid rule and SCOTUS. I just tweeted that out because that's what people need to understand. The precedent is there, and the Reid rule applies.